I wanna be happy. All right. What's going on, you guys? What's up? What's up? Toy with the T on the line, and welcome. Thank you for joining me. So today I have a guest on the line. So I was trying to reach out with this young man a little while ago, but we couldn't get with each other. But basically, you guys, I want to bring to you tonight Dexter Wimbish. He is running for DA of Spalding, Pike, Upson counties. I'm going to let him give you guys all the rest of the counties. Tell him all of the counties you'll be representing.
Spalding, Fayette, Upson, and Pike.
Spalding, Fayette, Upson, and Pike, right? And you'll be running for DA of those districts. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Absolutely. Okay, so let me turn the floor over to you guys. So, of course, Toy with the T here with Mr. Dexter Wimbish on the line today to talk about his running for of these counties. I'm going to turn the microphone to you so you can just kind of tell them your position, what you're running for, and who you're representing.
Right. Well, I got in this race a couple months ago. It was a special election call after the current DA was appointed by the governor. And I just felt like it was incumbent that the people have an opportunity to speak since the Supreme Court had declared that the governor could not appoint her to serve out the remaining 2 years. I spent the last 27 years of my life as a criminal defense attorney and working in civil and human rights with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and other civil rights organizations. And I just felt like that people need to have the opportunity to have their voices heard. These uncontested judicial and district attorney races, we shouldn't have those because the community needs to be able to have their voices heard in order to make sure that these offices are responsive to the community.
Absolutely. And you said you've worked 27 years for what was the background again?
I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law on the criminal side and the civil side for 27 years. I sat for the last 7 years as a municipal court judge in Greensboro, Georgia. I was the general counsel for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, as well as the legal counsel for an organization called the Center for Democratic Renewal that was started by Reverend C.T. Vivian. So I bring a lot of experience from a community activist background. And so my campaign is a reform campaign looking to change how the legal system works, and especially as it relates to minorities and people of color.
Absolutely. All right. So with that being said, absolutely, you do have some great experience. But I guess as just a regular person, not coming from a professional aspect. What is your background? I think that's something that's very important when we seek out who our leadership is going to be, and how you can probably identify with some of the people or the high risk individuals who may potentially be faced with, law enforcement or being arrested and things of that nature. What kind of background can you bring to kind of identify with those individuals who may be at a higher risk and who may find themselves coming into touch with the law?
Yeah. I come from a single parent household. I've been raised and I've lived in Georgia my entire life. I moved here about 5 years ago. I have a very keen understanding of how policy works and how policies affect individuals who come from disenfranchised communities. I've seen as a judge and as an attorney that the law does not oftentimes apply to individuals from every background. And so I look at it from the standpoint of we have to develop community partnerships between law enforcement and the community, bringing in community-based organizations, bringing in churches, because what we have now is a system of mass incarceration and probation, and that is not working. And the recidivism rates are through the roof. Our budgets cannot handle this continued belief that mass incarceration is the answer. We've got to move towards a place where we treat individuals differently and not faceless. And that's the key. And how do we create a culture in our communities that is responsive to the needs of the community?
Absolutely. And that's very and I know practice can be very vital to, the lives of some adults. But I guess I think, what is something that you are bringing to try to, I guess, help bring integrity and fairness, to this position? And I guess from a community aspect as well, when it comes to incarceration, with you having that understanding, what do we do about preventative measures? And how do you think that you can utilize this position to possibly bring up some preventative measures to go along with the amount of integrity that we have when we deal with people who may be coming into contact?
Well, one of the issues with the system of mass incarceration is the system is designed to put people in jail as opposed to having a system that's designed for restorative justice. And so that has to begin at the beginning of the process. First, understanding that, the DA's office first obligation is to the victim. And so the victim has to be paramount in that process. But at the same time, we got to look at how do we stop so many of these crimes from being committed. And that's looking at some of the social and the economic issues that's facing our community. We can't separate the two. And, because when somebody is sent to jail, it's not just they're affecting them, they're affecting their families. There's an issue of banishment with people when they being thrown out of communities and not being able to maintain contact with their families. So how you expect them to be able to reintegrate into society? The issue of extended use of probation that keeps people on paper, even after they served their time and paid their fine, they're still on probation. And that prevents people oftentimes being able to get jobs. And a lot of it comes down to what cases have to be prosecuted, and including incarceration, and what cases can we look at alternative means of sentencing. Also looking at mentoring programs we can put in our community to help our young people to keep who get off track to get back on track. Partnerships with different churches, from different community-based organizations, to look at it from a different standpoint, a holistic standpoint, rather than just the notion of our job is to lock everybody up and throw away the key. And that has not worked. And we got to figure out a way to free up resources so we can deal with a lot of the violent crimes that oftentimes go unprosecuted for years because the system is so bogged down dealing with these other type cases. And if we move away from the mass incarceration model, we can, in fact, reallocate resources to deal with the violent crimes and the drug crimes that are plaguing our community.
Absolutely. Totally agree. And as we talk about, this fight to kind of create or recreate or strengthen the trust and the actual recipients of our justice system, do you anticipate any challenges or at least any backlash, like trying to go into this system whom, in your belief, a lot of us feel and we're probably allocate some funds to preventive measures. But do you anticipate maybe some kickback, just with your experience and being in this field for so many years? And I'm sure, being around so many people, what is the outcome? Do you think that people are maybe going to push back or maybe even be against coming with something to support, a lack of being able to put people in the jail?
Well, I fully expect kickback, pushback, because we are so accustomed to the system that we're living in. It's a system that's been working this way for decades now. People are accustomed to this is how the system is supposed to work. It is a punitive system, but what we're finding out is that punitive system is not working. So of course there's going to be backlash. There's also going to be backlash when you start talking about increased accountability, but we have to have increased accountability. The fact of the matter is that many communities have never trusted law enforcement. And in many cases, they've got good reason when you have law enforcement that's not being held accountable for their actions. But at the same time, as a community, we've got to learn how we interact with law enforcement. Especially in communities of color who have been besieged by oppressive means for years and years. They don't, when they look at law enforcement, they don't necessarily see law enforcement the same way that somebody may see law enforcement in another community. So we've got to forge new partnerships between law enforcement, community policing. We got to change that model because everybody in our community is not a drug dealer, they're not a violent gang member. and you can't treat people the same way. Just like you got the school to prison pipeline now, while young people are being targeted in schools now, and they end up not only with a disciplinary issue, they end up with criminal charges. That's something that wasn't happening 25 or 30 years ago. Why have we gotten to that place? We got to look at those issues and come up with some real tough questions and tough answers. And everybody's not going to agree with it, but leadership has to, leadership has to push for new ways of dealing with these issues, because the way we're dealing with it now is just simply not working.
Absolutely. And, of course, I think one thing that I would like to bring to the table as I move forward is the breakdown of the judicial system and how each part is very vital, and not you as the end all be all to crime, but you are in a very pivotal position to be able to help influence and encourage different behaviors from a law enforcement perspective. But with that being said, what is your take on, per se, not only forging relationships with people in the community that may have had previous incarceration issues, but for people who may be getting released from prison and paying back their debt to society? How do you feel about maybe lightening some of the laws or some of the rules when it comes to getting certain jobs with, city and state facilities, or even, as a DA, can you imagine a program that, is scaled to meet the needs of the people who are breaking crimes? Because we know there's always a reason, 9 times out of 10, behind it. But if you have candidates that were probably recommended or even sought out to maintain positions, within government and state sectors, as a way to work off their punishment, or after they have paid back their debt to society. How do you feel about that after the fact?
I think those are all options that need to be studied. They got to be studied, because there's no doubt. You just check the ballot issues. We've got to look at those. Oftentimes the crimes that people commit have no relationship to the job they're trying to achieve. I noticed recently, even in the city of Atlanta, they eliminated the use of certain crimes as it relates to background for employment. And so those are social and those are social issues, socioeconomic issues that have to be addressed. And I'm fully supportive of anything that's going to help an individual be reintegrated back into society, because what's the option? If you don't give them economic options, chances are they're going to end up committing another crime. If you put them on probation for extended amounts of time, not able to get a job, what do we think happens to those people? They end up back committing crimes. And you've got tons and tons of jobs in the technical fields, or air conditioning, plumbing, those type fields that people could be, led into those types of fields if their record was not being held against them. So there's got to be this issue of expanding Georgia's record restriction program beyond what it is now, to allow people to be able to restrict their record. It doesn't make sense that somebody had on the fence 20 years ago and now the fence is still holding them back from getting a job. It doesn't make sense that people have committed their sentence don't understand that in the state of Georgia, once you pay all your fines and complete the sentence, you're automatically eligible to go back on the voting rolls. People don't know that. They're not told that. Those are some of the things that we can do from an educational standpoint to empower individuals to become productive members of society, which is the end result that we seek.
Absolutely. And definitely, I'm for Black excellence in every way, and even to the point to where you should have to find yourself in trouble. I still believe operating with excellence wherever you are not only can get you to a early release, but you just never know who's watching, and who knows people on the outside, and how things can transpire no matter what the situation you're in. So I feel like, if we have someone who understands the ethics and the backgrounds, it will be easier to judge them more fairly instead of just thinking everyone is criminals and crooks and give everybody the maximum sentence. And I think that it would give you the eye to say, hey, I think that, we have a program for you potentially that we might want you to enter, and in the event you cannot fulfill the obligation of this program, then we might look at doing you some time, so with being and your past as a judge, can you see there be more room for different programs or different partnerships that we can develop as a incarceration alternative? And in the event that they should not follow the guidelines of these programs, then we should look at facing some real time. Like, do you think that that can be something that could be instituted more? Is it a need more forward? Would you be for something like in that position?
There's an increased need for alternative sentencing. There's an increased need for funding for accountability courts so that individuals don't have to end up being incarcerated. We got to have more funding for those programs. There are mentoring programs that need to be developed for our young people. One of the things we've done in the last few years in my courtroom is that as it relates to simple drug offenses, we moved away from incarceration to a system where there is online education. They pay a fine, and if they qualify, they are sentenced under the conditional discharge statute. We've had situations where we had young people come in, as opposed to them doing the fine, they've written essays, they've done videos, they've done online education. We've got a program called Degrees for Dismissal, where if you come in and you don't have a high school diploma or a GED, you go get that and you bring it back, and then your case gets dismissed, and that GED or high school diploma is used to actually pay your fine. So there are ways, I think, that once we get into place and do some real analyzation and assessment of what we have, especially post COVID-19, we can begin to look at what are the different ways that we can address these issues without focusing on, incarceration. But understanding that, you got a segment of the population that incarceration, and sometimes long-time incarceration, is the only way you're going to deal with those people. They've made a decision that criminality is going to be their life, and you have to deal with them that way. And you just move past that. And I look at it from an 80-20 rule. There's about 80% people getting involved in the criminal justice system. It's a one-time offense. It's something that it's a bump in the road. Let's get those people out of the system and back into society, so we can focus our resources, time, money, and personnel on locking up those who are committing the more serious and violent crimes in our community. And once we start to deal with that, once we get a process where criminals understand if you commit a crime, you're going to be tried and you're going to be punished, we'll see a reduction in crime at that point.
Right. But it leads to this question, because I think that clearly we the people get the fact that breaking a crime, you go to jail. But I think the next level would be, oftentimes we see issues to where we sit in jail because of the lack of funds and misrepresentation or lack of representation, and other people may be able to hire lawyers to get them off of certain charges that someone who cannot afford a lawyer may get a maximum amount of time for. As a DA, knowing the law, understanding if this lawyer pleads a good case, they get off. But that is an injustice that I think we, the people, suffer from. And in your position, what is the suggestion to tell a family who cannot afford to have a representation, but may have someone else, and because their lawyer is better, is why they may not get the same amount of time? How does that go hand in hand with the legal system?
That's not the DA's job. The DA's office is to prosecute crimes, and that's what we do. But what I do bring to the office is going to be a level of integrity and transparency. that, for instance, we're not going to try crimes, we're not going to arrest people and try people for crimes where there's not enough evidence to support the crime. I believe that we need to move to eliminate the cash bond process. I think that people need to be on these low offenses, crimes need to be released on their own recognizance. Those are some of the ways that we can help create a system that's more sensitive to the plight of those who oftentimes languish in jail because they can't make bond, they can't hire a private attorney, and they end up sitting there for months. And out of really sometimes out of necessity, they end up pleading, even though they may not be guilty. But as DA, my job is to put people in jail for crimes that they commit and punish them for those crimes, and that's what I'll be committed to. But at the same time, understanding that there are levels of fairness and equality that still have to be presented. If you got exculpatory evidence, my office is going to turn that exculpatory evidence over, not hold that evidence in hopes that you can pressure somebody into taking a plea for a crime that they didn't commit. Because at the end of the day, the objective of the criminal justice system is not a conviction, it's justice. And I think that's where we have it wrong right in this system, that we believe that the purpose of the criminal justice system is a conviction rather than justice.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important too with people. Okay, so I guess when it comes to brutality, this is the next level of what happens. And I think this is, probably the level that has everyone on an uproar, from police handling and police officers exercising and it not coinciding with law. And I'm going to just use, the example of, the George Floyd cases. In a lot of these cases, as a judge and wanting to go for a DA, maybe point out some issues that we, the people, might have gotten on wrong convictions of some of these officers, when in fact to us it looked like it was criminal and negligent, versus where it may have worked to their behalf on the side of the law.
I didn't hear that last part of the question. You went out.
I was trying to see if you can maybe comment on how some officers may have gotten away with something that we may have saw as criminal or brutal, and a DA maybe have your insight with your experience on usually some ways that an officer can get off with something that looks brutal, but it works in their defense. Like some of the cases that we've been seeing.
Yeah, I think it goes to training, and it goes to training, and it goes to accountability. First of all, you got to be open to the idea of prosecuting those who've done wrong. You can't protect people who are not being accountable to the community, and so I think it's a process. I think that we're seeing a lot more education and awareness as to what a DA can do. You take, for instance, in the case of Ahmaud Arbery, where there was quite a bit of community backlash, and so we ended up seeing the DA being replaced there. And so I think as we move along, we're going to see more and more of that, of the community just not accepting the refusal to prosecute officers, especially when there are facts that show there's clearly some issues there with accountability and transparency.
Absolutely. And that's great. And I guess, just with all the years of experience, let me ask you, what can you say, if you're even allowed to talk about it, in your career, what is probably one of the most trying cases that has ever come across you in your career?
I don't really talk much about the cases I've been involved in any sort of specifics. As a criminal defense attorney, some of the cases I've had cases where we've had individuals who were accused of doing a crime, who were not, who actually did not commit the crime. We're able to able to get them out. We're proud of that. But in my role as DA, that's a very different role. And so I'm focused on that. I'm focused on at this point making sure everybody gets justice. Making sure that people get fairness and equality regardless of where they come from.
Absolutely. And I'm interested in knowing how something like that affects you as a prosecutor, and you're going through the evidence and you recognize that the person you're prosecuting isn't guilty. How can that affect not only the case? I mean, what challenges can that cause for not only a prosecutor, which I totally get why one may want to look over it, but like how challenging can that be for everything? And can anything be done when you, the prosecutor, acknowledge that this person might potentially be innocent? Like what can I do for a case?
Well, I mean, there's an ethical obligation on the state's part that if you uncover exculpatory evidence, meaning evidence that might lead to the exoneration of an individual, you have to turn that evidence over. And so I think that's the key, is that we have to have a level playing field and not bring charges knowing that somebody is innocent of the crime, but hoping that the system is going to result in a conviction. And so that's how I look at it. I look at it, from an ethical standpoint. We got to change that culture, because we got to be dispensing justice and not dispensing convictions. And I think coming from the side of the defense side and also sitting as a judge, I can bring that aspect to the prosecutor side, that this is not about a high rate of conviction. This is not about being tough on crime, especially because if you decide to bring charges against somebody that is innocent of the crime, you're disrupting them, you're disrupting the family, and you might also be opening yourself up to some civil liabilities, in the future. So those things have to be taken into consideration.
Absolutely. Well, you know what, Wimbish, thank you so much for joining me today. I was just trying to ask some of the questions that I think, we just want to know as a community. I think you did great. I reproved before we even spoke today, so I'm totally confident. And wish you all the luck, man, on position of DA. I feel like you got it. But definitely thank you for taking the time to have a discussion with me. Let me answer those questions. I appreciate you so much. And if you ever need anything, remember, I'm here for you in any way I can. And I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to remind everybody to go out to vote tomorrow, February 9th. Spalding, Fayette, Pike, and Upson County from 7 to 7 at your regular precinct. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you so much. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me, man. Toya with the T, of course, and I was on the line with Mr. Dexter Wimbish, who is running for DA. So make sure you guys go ahead and vote tomorrow. Thank you guys for joining me so much. Make sure you go ahead, get out and vote. Make sure you vote for Dexter. He's the man with the plan, man. I think we definitely need this level of integrity in our communities, man. So thank you so much. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and join. And don't forget, go vote tomorrow. Griffin, go Mr. Wimbish. You have our votes, and we hope to see you soon. So thank you, guys. Sway with the T. Make sure you follow me on all social media. And don't forget, go vote. Bye.